In this video, I want to show you about customizing your interface inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. First, we're going to start off by dragging our interface around and watching it dynamically switch. If I hover in between these two panels, I will get the double edge icon. And let's say I want to make my timeline panel a little bit taller, and I want to make my program monitor and my source panel a little bit smaller. I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and you'll watch Adobe Premiere dynamically shift, and it will grow that timeline and it will shrink the other two windows. Now, let's say I want to do the opposite. I'll just simply click, hold, and drag, and now I have more real estate on top here, so I can see the two bigger monitors and I can see less of my timeline. And let's say, for instance, I really want to pay more attention to my program monitor. I will click, hold, and drag in between the two monitors, drag to the left, and let's say I want to do the opposite, I can just drag to the right. Now that we have all of this kind of screwed up, instead of dragging to bring everything back to normal, what we could do is simply go Window, Workspace, Reset Current Workspace. A little dialog will pop up that asks you, are you sure you want to reset back to its original layout? And we're currently in the editing workspace. So I hit yes. That brings us back to square one. Under the window menu, workspace, you can see there's a few presets. Assembly, we now have a bigger project panel. We have our source and our program monitor inside of the same panel with the source panel forward, and we have our timeline beneath. Let's switch over to the audio workspace. Our audio clip mixer, audio track mixer, and source, all within the same panel. Inside of the color correction workspace, we have our effect controls forward on the left-hand side. Source, program monitor. Now we have a reference monitor in the bottom right. Timeline is a little bit smaller. And we have our tools and our audio meters. So now we can focus strictly on what's going on in these three windows. Now if I go back to editing, this is our default. So besides the presets, you can also create your own. I'll go ahead and drag my project panel over to the left, but instead of using this side, I will grab with this side so I don't screw up my toolbar. And I'll just make that a little bit smaller. Then I want to grab the program monitor and make the program monitor a little bit bigger than my source. And let's say I would like to make my audio meters a little bit bigger. I can grab them over here and drag them out like that. Now let's say this is my new layout. So now I'm just going to go Window, Workspace, New Workspace, and I'll title it My New Workspace. So after we save it, we go back to Window, Workspace, and as you can see, it's been added to our list of presets. We're going to go back to the editing workspace, which looks like it didn't change. So we go Window, Workspace, Reset Current Workspace. Then you get the dialog that says, are you sure you want to reset the editing workspace to its original layout? When we click yes, and we go back to our Window, Workspace, My New Workspace, we have our new setup. And we can also go back to Workspace, go to Editing, and we're back at our default. Now I do want to show you one preference, Appearance. And there's a slider here. Inside of this slider, we can go to our default, which is right about here. Or I like to make my interface a little bit darker and a little bit easier on the eye. To me, this looks a little bit more slick and easier to use. Some people might like the retro versions of Premiere. So if you want to take it back to this looks like older versions of Premiere. But to me, it's a little too harsh on my eyes to be staring at all day long in an edit session. So I like to drag this down and bring my colors to right where the R is on darker. That typically works for me. Now I want to show you about docking, undocking, and grouping. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to grab my effects tab here. This is basically like an effects browser, so I can view any kind of effects. If I type in color, I'd be able to grab the fast color corrector. Let me just exit out of that. Grab this effects tab, and when I stick it right over here next to my program monitor within the same panel. So I'm just simply going to click, hold, and drag, and then you'll see all these purple highlights as I'm dragging it around. So if I stick it in the middle here and just drop, it now will group those two tabs together. So now I have the effects browser and I have my program monitor within the same panel. Grab this history tab and I want to dock it right on top, right next to the effects. Or let's say, for instance, if I wanted to make that a floating panel, if you hold Control on a PC, Command on a Mac, click, hold, drag, while holding the Command key or the Control on a PC. Now I have a floating panel. And let's say I wanted to group it. I will click, hold, and drag until I get the purple highlight inside of that panel. When I let go, now I have program monitor, effects, and history all within this same panel. So that is docking, undocking, and creating floating panels. If you did happen to have a floating panel and you hit the little X to close it out and you don't see it anymore, you can always go under Window and look for any part of your interface, like markers. And if there's a check, that means that it's present already. Otherwise, you can just click on it. It'll pop back up to where you found it last time. So this one happened to be a floating panel, so it popped back up as a floating panel. Let's say I want to dock it. I will click, hold, drag it to the middle of that panel, and it will group itself. So let's say I wanted to grab my audio meters part of the interface and drag it underneath my program monitor, and I will drop it in this little highlighted zone right here that it's been put into this panel right here, and it kind of broke up the two panels. So maybe I want to drag it down until that looks good. So if you did want to view your audio meters from left to right, you could, right below my program monitor. Or of course I can drag it right here on the perforated edge, click, hold, and drag, and I can drop it underneath my source. Instead, again, you need to probably size it, and that looks good. So you do have those options. If you did happen to have a smaller panel, again, I'm going to grab the tools from the right hand side of the frame and drag over. And as soon as your panel gets too congested and your tabs are a little too big and you can't see all of your tabs, you get a scroll bar at the top. So you can click, hold, and drag on the scroll bar, and you can see I have info and markers over to the right, and over to the left I have my project tab. So you can navigate around any of these. You can even grab any of these tabs and place them wherever you'd like. Again, if you wanted to, you can create a new workspace, and then you don't have to, every single time you open Premiere Pro, create a brand new workspace. So as you can see, Adobe Premiere Pro is very easy to customize. If you'd like to know which workspace you currently are in, I want you to be aware of the Options panel. So I'm going to click the Options panel under Window, Options, and then I get this floating panel that tells me which workspace I currently am using. So I'm actually going to dock that above everything in its own panel, and I'll get a green strip. So when I let go, now I have a thin strip above my entire workspace, and I can tell exactly which workspace I'm in. Now the downside to this is if I switch workspaces to my new workspace, it's not present unless I go back in, put a check in the box, do the same, drag it up, drop it above, and now if I were to switch between editing and my new workspace, you can see that it's still there. So that's a great little panel to use if you like to configure your workspaces and you like to jump between workspaces more frequently. So spend a little time customizing your interface, and you can sync your workspace layouts along with keyboard shortcuts, preferences, and settings within your Creative Cloud membership on any machine, Mac or PC. So we've learned customizing your interface, adjust by dragging, sorting through your preset workspaces, docking, undocking, and grouping your panels, resetting your workspace, and adjusting your interface color. And don't forget the Options panel.